Hey everybody, welcome to Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. Make a play, Canada's choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies. Coming to you live from United Center in Chicago, where the Toronto Maple Leafs drop a 5-3 decision to the Chicago Blackhawks, joined by Paul Hendrick, who is in Madrid, taking time to co-host this with me. Henny, love your dedication. Going to get you to bed. I know Madrid is the city where they only have dinner at midnight, so I know it's not that much of an adjustment, but still really happy you're joining us for this one. Maybe not unexpected that the Leafs dropped this one. I mean, it is a lower opponent, but it is a very tired team. Obviously, a lot happened yesterday. A very high event game for the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Montreal Canadiens with the newcomers and Ryan O'Reilly and Neil Achari, and not really getting a lot of rest. But from an underlying analytics standpoint, very close. But certainly this seemed to be the Patrick Kane prove everybody wrong type of game, because it seemed like everybody was kind of, writing him off. And it just seemed like it was just not really happening for him in terms of the trade market. But certainly he made a statement tonight.
Yes, he certainly did. Let's just get back to your initial statement. Maybe this is a game the Leafs deserve to lose. Yes, they deserve to lose. Now, that said, they did out-attempt the opposition 69-42. They came into Chicago with the fourth best record in the National Hockey League against a Blackhawk team with the absolute worst record in the National Hockey League, against a goaltender who was playing his fifth ever National Hockey League start. This shouldn't have even been close. Now, you've got to look at Toronto's goaltending, and Ilya Samsonov certainly not feeling himself. He has struggled overall on the road this season, but he's getting over a GI bug, a flu bug, for what you will. He did not look sharp, had to look sharp to keep his team in. But to get back to what you were saying in Patrick Kane, you know what? When your name's been bandied about and maybe discussed in terms as not quite the player you used to be, a proud veteran warrior like Patrick Kane is going to show them differently. He was impressive tonight. And again, 3 goals, 1 assist. And then you look at Max Domi with 1 goal and 3 assists. And the Blackhawks may be licking their chops as to what they might be getting back for these 2 players as we approach the deadline in early March. So all in all, great game for the Blackhawks. Home ice Sunday night, 20,000 plus fans. It's a great building. But to get back to your initial statements, Dave, I'll disagree. This is a game the Leafs should have and had to win. I think home ice is going to be so important in that first round. And when you give up 2 points to the Chicago Blackhawks, it's not great.
Well, you know what? Like, I'm not surprised this happened, and we'll get Keith's comments in a moment here. But I remember after the game Wednesday, and that was a team that was kind of tired. You know, Sheldon Keefe was kind of very adamant about the fact that even though they won that game, they weren't going to take much from it. And when I asked him why he felt that way, you know, and he didn't call the Blackhawks a non-NHL team, but he said it was a very tired team coming in and all that other stuff. But it's very rare in a situation where after a win, you're just going to come out and say you're not taking anything good or bad out of the game. That still means something in the standings. It wasn't like a game before a break where everyone's mentally somewhere else, or one of those games where your top stars sit out because you can't move up or down in the standings, like you mentioned. So there was that. So, for Sheldon Keefe to kind of have the reverse kind of happen and Chicago win, I'm not really surprised to say that, but here's his comments, just kind of addressing the difference from that game and the difference from Patrick Kane from Wednesday compared to tonight.
The one in Toronto didn't get any free looks at the goalie.
What was your sense of how much they fed off him tonight once he got rolling, Kane?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I thought we were right there. We break down the game. We were in control of the puck, control of the game quite a bit. We were in the offensive zone twice as much as they were. So I don't know if that was necessarily part of it, but obviously you can't give a guy like that many opportunities. They're going to score, and you're going to get behind in the game. So that was the disappointing part when you're playing the game like this tonight, like we were. You can't chase the game and be playing from behind. That's dangerous territory. So that got up to us.
Yeah, So there you go. I mean, it's a big difference there when you're kind of looking at, well, you know, they should have won. They should have all done all these things. But Patrick Kane had a bit of a chip on his shoulder. And so, look, the underlying stats showed that they were, still kind of very much in it. You mentioned Samsonov, and we'll get to him in a bit. But at the end of the day, yeah, these are important games in the standings, but the schedule's just been kind of nuts. That when they came into this, I just kind of, in my mind, felt, okay, I know the Bodog line of the day on Wednesday was probably the most lopsided in terms of odds that any NHL game had in years, if not ever. But this was one I thought, okay, you know what? There's a good value there for the Blackhawks.
Yeah, and they're tough on home ice. And you think back a couple of years ago, when the Leafs season, not jeopardy, but they got off to that tough start. William Nylander ends it, but whatever. It was a 7-6 game. I mean, things get wild in that building. And I remember, just the press box, it's so high. And then you've got the organ, and you've got the 20,000 fans. It's Sunday night in Chicago. And you're right. Throw caution to the wind. Who the hell knows? And then you put the Leafs into a back-to-back situation with a goaltender who was less than feeling great. And Patrick Kane, who had not a chip, he had a cinder block on his shoulder. And make no mistake about it, he came into this game exceptionally motivated, given the talk that possibly he's going, if he's going to go anywhere, Toronto would be one of those teams, the Rangers being the other, and the Leafs acting on, Ryan O'Reilly from St. Louis, and maybe bypassing Patrick Kane, which I still think is a pretty good idea overall, but he was going to come to this game in this one moment against the Maple Leafs, and he was going to prove himself well, and he did. Patrick Kane, one of the greatest Chicago Blackhawks of all time, and we saw why here tonight in a snippet of what he can do, but he's been doing it his entire career.
23 saves for Ilya Samsonov. Certainly, it's not going to be a great save percentage out of 27 shots. The 28th one was an empty net. Of course, he only gave up 4 goals, but we've been mentioning how sick he was, and we kind of asked because he had an illness going into the break, which was a little bit different, and here he explains exactly how he was feeling.
No. In his break, I got some cough. Right now, like more stomach and sick. Right. It's not great. It's hard day in the shit.
Hey.
Oh man, as a journalist, it's one of those things where I was just kind of like, I can't tweet this. Like, I just know, what the fallout's going to be, and it's going to get out eventually. But because there's going to be clips of this on SportsCenter on here. So I had to mention it, but and he might get in trouble from the team for being as honest as he's been. But you gotta love the honesty there, Henny.
Yeah, you really do, and. You know what? You see what's on social media these days, and what's on television. This is nothing, and this is a guy.
I agree.
And I know you do. This is a guy who's in a situation that many of us have been in, and having to go to work and just sorting a gut check in more ways than one. And I'll give him credit for battling. He's going to be okay. I'm just worried. Big time with the Leafs on the road. They're 4-7-1 in their last 12 games on the road. 16 of their last 25 games are on the road. And right now, Ilya Samsonov, who's not very good on the road, is going to be your goaltender, given what Matt Murray's status might be. And, of course, there's Joseph Waller, Eric Kallgren in behind there. So, obviously, the team's going to have to play better. But, again, for Samsonov here tonight, I think we've got to give him a pass. He worked as hard as he could, made a couple of great saves late in the game to give the Leafs a chance to win the game. Didn't turn out that way because of, maybe play earlier on. But let it be said out of the mouths of Babes and Ilya Samsonov, he let everybody know how he felt here tonight. We've all been there. So good on him.
Yeah, Henny, you and I both love the puns. And you mentioned it was a gut check. It was only appropriate that Cole Gutman scored the game-winning goal as a result of this.
Yes.
His first ever NHL goal, mind you, unassisted. Didn't really know much about Cole Gutman going into it, but that's just kind of the way it's been for the Chicago Blackhawks, who are kind of in this full tank mode. They made news earlier today with Jonathan Toews saying that, he's not going to be moved because he's still kind of dealing with some symptoms from long COVID and feels that he's on the mend. But as a result, he just didn't feel it would be fair to go move to a team. And all the reports are he's still going to try to come back in March. And so, this shows these are two guys that are going to be unrestricted free agents, and Toews and Kane, who, you look up, you see the 3 Stanley Cup banners, what they mean to the franchise. And you can definitely tell that this was all about Kane and the way he performed. And just, there's been a lot of those duels. You were here for that Matthews versus Kane duel where they were just kind of back and forth goal celebrations. I think that was 2018. Just kind of showing, Austin Matthews has always kind of looked up to someone like Patrick Kane, of course, American sniper, forward. And so it was really interesting to see it all on display. All right, so another storyline going into this, Rasmus Sandin did not play. He had, they said bumps and bruises. He took a bump. I tried to press Sheldon Keefe if it was anything to do with the wrist or something that happened at the end of the first period where it looked like he was kind of favoring his wrist going into the dressing room, but he wouldn't bite on that. Probably was. I guess we'd find out, but nonetheless, it's not anything they expect that he'll miss too much time on. And as a result of that, we saw some changes. Connor Timmins going back in, but because of that, there were more right-handed shots. So TJ Brody kind of had to move down to the left side, and there was a bit of a defensive mismatch. You had Riley with Hall, which at times has not been a good look together. Tonight might have been a good example of that. But here's Morgan Riley on just kind of the adjustment that not just putting in a new defenseman would be, but the fact that the right-left balance kind of gets thrown into flux when they have to make a change like that without a practice.
Yeah. There's always challenges when you change lines and pairings and stuff, but, a good team and, good players have to be able to adjust and not let it affect you. Obviously changing in pairs, that's bound to happen again this year between now and the end of the season. So be able to adjust and, play with whoever it is on that specific night.
Yeah, and Timmins coming in, he skated with TJ Brody and moved from the right to the left. Brody, of course, is, I think a lot of people would agree, the preferred pairing for Morgan Riley if everybody's healthy. And you could just see it when he returned back last week. And so you kind of got stuck with Brody Timmins, and then Giordano Liljegren was kind of the only thing that kind of stayed consistent, and they kind of mixed and matched around the minutes. What did you make of the way things kind of looked from a defensive standpoint?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think we're seeing a situation where Justin Hall is sort of falling back into that most critiqued Leaf defenseman guy that we saw back in October. I didn't mind his game here tonight. I mean, he was, 22-16. He led the team in ice time. Riley was not far behind, 17 seconds late. I didn't mind Justin's game for the most part. Riley, I really enjoyed, obviously. I know he ended up -3, including that empty net goal, but, it's 22nd game back. He's got 7 points in his last 7 games. I think he's starting to settle down. I hope to see a situation where, obviously, he and Brody are going to be back together, and Hall is back to where he may be in, a lower pairing sort of performer. But we all know that Sheldon Keefe, even despite sitting him out, a game ago, has faith in him. Right shot, can skate, good penalty killer, and all that. And he's been around a little while now with the organization. So Connor Timmins, not bad, ended up -1. I know he was on the ice for the game-winning goal in a bit of a tough situation on that 2-on-1 break. But I didn't mind his game. He's going to see some time. I think before all is said and done in early March, that there's going to be another defenseman coming in to add some depth here. And again, the deck's going to be shuffled even further. But all in all, I wouldn't read too much into it tonight. I mean, I think they did enough to win the game tonight. Just Chicago's goaltender played Toronto's goaltender. And you mentioned a couple of guys like, Gutman, University of Denver and Stauber, Providence College last year. I mean, this is where the Blackhawks are at until the end of the season. but a couple of players, much unheralded, found a way to raise their games against a real powerful hockey team in Toronto, and that was the difference tonight. But, Toronto defense play, I'm okay with their blue line. It could have been a bit better, but I'm not going to be overcritical. I'm not going to be too overcritical of Justin Hall either.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned Jackson Stauber in that first period. He was making a lot of questionable decisions with the puck in terms of how he was playing it. And then when he was in town in Toronto on Wednesday, I looked it up and I had to get it confirmed with someone else that he's indeed the son of former Kings goaltender Rob Stauber, who backed up Kelly Hrudey in that 93 playoff run between the Toronto Maple Leafs and LA Kings. And I believe I had his hockey card. Like, it is one of those common cards that you get, which is why I remembered the name. I was like, Stauber, because he didn't play a lot, but he was more of a kind of AHL, IHL journeyman in that regard. But there was a long period of time where he was Kelly Hrudey's backup up with the Kings in 93 and 94. And I was like, oh, yeah, they're from the same state. I wonder if they're related. And there you go. It's a father and son. And so that's kind of, you're right. That's kind of where they are with their goaltending situation right now. Peter Mrazek played in that game on Wednesday, and Peter Mrazek's probably going to get the lion's share of starts between now and the end. And Mrazek still has another year at $3.8 million. But, even if the Blackhawks win the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, perhaps they are, still going with Mrazek because maybe the job's not done, that they're able to kind of flip the script in 1 year, and they won't have Kane either unless Kane decides or the franchise and Kane decide that that's still the fit for him going back. It's rarely the case when they go back if there is a move in that regard. So there's a lot of pieces at play there as well. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about some of the new guys again. Noel Acciari scoring his first goal as a Leaf, and we'll look at some of the other news and notes when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs and kind of where they factor in as they get ready for another road game against the Buffalo Sabres, a home game, and then one of the longest trips I could ever recall on record, Henny, where they're going all across Canada and New York and Seattle in a span of 11 days for just 5 games. You're listening to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. Rink Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.
Is your online business ready for the cookie-less future and set to properly capture your customers' valuable first-party data? Hey, it's Ray Ferraro. Right now, my friends at North Beach, along with their partners at Craft Growth, are offering small business owners and entrepreneurs a free website digital audit. So you can find out just exactly how ready your website is for the cookie-less future. Your online presence has never been more important. So visit craftgrowth.net and get your free digital audit. That's craftgrowth.net.
Naslund.
We weren't afraid of facing any line or any deep pairing because we knew that we would generate offense.
Bertuzzi.
I was like, I can play in this league and I can play a big role in this league and I can be dominant if all the stars align.
Morrison.
There was a confidence that we believed if we went out and played the way we were capable of, we could score every shift.
Their story in their words. Unreal West Coast Express. Available now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. David Alter with you from United Center in Chicago, joined by Paul Hendrick, who is in Madrid, Spain, partying it up, enjoying the life over there. And it is time for the Bodog line of the day. And Henny, the Leafs picked up a couple of centers. There's still many days before March 3rd at the trade deadline. I'm going to put the over-under at 1.5. Do you feel the Leafs make more or less than 1.5 trades between now at the end of the deadline? The 3-way retention things don't count. That counts as one transaction.
Okay, I'm going to go less, and I'm going to go one trade. And Dave, who is the one player I've been harping on since we've been doing this podcast?
Yeah, Luke Shen. I knew you were going to go Luke Shen.
You.
Yes.
and I'm still going to go that route. And there's a guy who will fit into that room so well and just provide an extra body that we're going to need in the event of a possible run that could go deep, and certainly some grit that is going to be needed in both of those first two series in the event that they're able to get past the first series and into the second. So to go with it, under 1.5, I think it's going to be 1. I think that's just about it for Kyle Dubas. His big deal was this past week, and there'll be some tidying up on the blue line. I don't mind their blue line, but I think they could use some depth and some sandpaper, and Luke fits the bill in both regards.
Yeah, so like I see that, I understand that, and there's a lot of people who feel it's more even a defensive move to make sure Tampa and Boston doesn't get him, because they just see how Shen helped out with Tampa, and then they're worried about Boston because Boston's always a threat. So Leaf fans are just like, well, it'd be the worst if he joins them, and then something happens, and it's just the kind of scars from the yesteryear of that concern. But here's the question I have for you. How much is that going to cost? Because right now all the reports are that anything like a fourth or fifth rounder or a low mid pick is not going to be enough. The Leafs only have their fifth and sixth round pick for this year. They don't have very many picks outside of the first round for next year. You're not going to give away a first round pick for Luke Shen. I think we can agree on that. So what's the package that goes there? Because the pattern with Kyle Dubas when it comes to these teams finishing in the top 5 overall is to not give away anyone on the roster. Is it time to change that? Is it time for someone else to go in that regard?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's a prospect, and you've got to hold on to your draft picks. But Luke, in his specific case, unrestricted free agent. You're not. This isn't the second coming of Bobby or Larry Robinson. Let's be honest. But where the problem might arise is interest from a couple of the other teams, and you've talked about it, the arms race in the Atlantic Division as the teams get ready for the opening rounds of the playoffs in mid-April. Luke all of a sudden now is a prize gem, but in reality, he's a veteran defenseman, not really quick. Does provide a few of the tangibles I talked about. But it better be a late round draft pick unless one of the other two teams are going to ante up as well. But again, Tampa doesn't have much on the shelf in terms of what they give up. I'm not certain where Boston would go in that regard. But in Toronto's case, it might be somebody from the Toronto Marlies headed that way. And we'll see as Vancouver, trades a player they could very well sign in the offseason and just go back. Luke's offseason home is Kelowna. The British Columbia, greater Vancouver area is home for he and his family. He could very well be going back there. And so with Vancouver, I'm not sure how much they're going to want to get. They're going to want to get the world, but realistically, I don't think that's going to be possible.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, just because the cupboard is quite bare. And if you look at Kyle Dubas' philosophy of what they've done, keeping everyone intact, loading up on depth, because remember, the whole purpose of this is to get guys in case other guys get hurt and you have options. And, I'm still not, just given how different Kyle Dubas went with what he said to us and what he actually did, I still feel like maybe a goalie move might still happen. Like maybe if there's room to grab a depth insurance David Riddick style, just in case, you never know. Just because, look, like we've talked about it, it's a couple of unproven commodities, or a couple of goaltenders who are kind of reclamation projects. One's a bit of an unproven commodity in the playoffs. The other one has established himself in the playoffs but can't stay healthy in Matt Murray. And then after that, you don't want to run into a situation like Colorado did, where they were kind of stuck with going into Michael Hutchinson and other guys because they just didn't have the depth in that spot. So just based on the 180 that they did in terms of this Blues trade, I'm not sure if Kyle Dubas doesn't trade for a goalie. But again, I don't know what they can do outside of trading a decent enough prospect. Mikhail Abramov was not going to factor in the Leafs' plans. Let's be real. All right, speaking of the trades that they did make, Noel Acciari got his first goal as a Leaf, and it was a pretty important one to kind of bring that game back within reach in the second period, particularly late. It was the Patrick Kane show. It was just after he scored picked up a hat trick, and then Acciari just at least made it a 1-goal game with about 2 minutes and 14 seconds to go in the second period, and he talked about just kind of how it's felt the last couple of days and just fitting in with the new group of teammates.
Just try and play hockey. I mean, it's meeting a lot of new people, and but these guys, everyone here has been very welcoming to me and Ori, and there's one goal in mind in this locker room, and we want to be a part of that.
Yeah, of course, that goal is going very far and into the playoffs, perhaps winning it all. I'm sure winning it all is their goal. I think a lot of Leaf fans will be happy with substantial improvement when it comes to a deep playoff run. But Noel Acciari is really, I don't know if he's talked about enough in this trade, Henny. Like, Ryan O'Reilly is obviously the star piece, the top 6 guy, the potential, we were talking about maybe third line center, but then they grabbed 2 centers that the center depth is really strong right now. And Noel Acciari has been a thorn in the Leafs side in the 18 and 19 playoff series when he was with the Boston Bruins. I'm curious what you remember of that and just your thoughts about the trade overall, because it's one thing to get Ryan O'Reilly and you target that as the big name, but to address the weakness at center by getting 2 centers that can really be flexible in that spot just seemed to be exactly what the Leafs needed in that spot.
Yeah, and to get back to your question, what do I remember? I remember Acciari and Corrali, and there were a bunch of others who just ground down the Leafs and really limited what the top couple of lines can do, and those players in particular that Toronto was not able to get unleashed and score and be a factor in the game. He's just a physical presence along the wall. He's tough to move in the middle, and I enjoy watching Alex Kerfoot tonight and just how much bigger he looks out there in terms of what he did to set up that goal, utilizing his speed and moving to one side, just getting the puck into the middle. Who's there? Of course, it was batted down, but Acciari's there to knock it in. He reminds me a lot of Glendening, when Detroit had him and just how tough he was, just a fire hydrant. And they're going to need players like him. And what we're seeing now, the Leafs top 6, that's incredible balance. But their bottom 6 is pretty balanced as well. And in fact, the third, fourth line, you could intersperse one with the other and call the other the fourth, the other the third as well. Game-winning goal a night earlier by Pierre Engvall, although we didn't see much from Pierre tonight. But, there's a case in point. Third line with the game-winning goal, and Acciari with a goal that got the Leafs back within 1 early in the third period in Chicago on Sunday night. So he just makes everyone bigger and bolder and tougher to play against. And I just like the balance. I like what he brings to the bottom 6 as much as I like what Ryan O'Reilly brings to the top 6 and the domino effect that the arrival of both those players have had in their respective lines in making Toronto just a better team, balance-wise, which they're going to need come mid-April.
I feel that acquisition really solved a lot of the debate, because they could have gone with another team and been like, okay, we get the O'Reilly, we get a center who could play wing, or we can move stuff around. But yeah, we maybe need a top 6 guy, but we need a third-line center too. And if you're going to move them up and down, it doesn't really help in terms of consistency in what you have. But when you grab these 2 guys, the roles seemed obvious at that point. It seemed pretty clear that O'Reilly was going to be a second-line guy. I don't know if we necessarily felt that it was going to be Tavares on the wing immediately, like it's been these 2 games. Of course, Sheldon Keefe talked about why that is and how now, because of the center depth, they had been talking about moving Tavares to the wing, but they just really didn't have the center depth where they felt confident in doing that, and felt that Tavares was obviously more valuable in that second C spot. And then, of course, in that 1C spot when Austin Matthews got hurt. So now if one of those guys gets hurt, it's an obvious Tavares can move over to the center spot, and they still have that third line depth center type, whether he's on the third or fourth line in someone like Noel Acciari, and David Kampf can be that other centerman. And you're right. Like, I mean, I felt that bottom six was missing that type of player that can at least just bring some consistency to that bottom six in terms of what that type of player is supposed to be. And Noel Acciari could very well be that guy. I just don't know if they keep mixing and matching around. My only concern is there's just so much experimentation that happens that I would like to see the experimentation stop in the final couple weeks. I'm just not as confident that they're going to do that because it's just not Sheldon Keefe's way.
No, injuries will also dictate, Dave, what Sheldon
that I'd
does.
understand.
Yeah, but it's going to be a dress rehearsal for the playoffs. And I think the last couple of weeks, where are we now? 7 weeks to go in the regular season, 25 games, 16 on the road. You're going to see things settle into a predictable hum as far as those four lines are concerned. But you can plug in guys any which way. But the bottom six just look more formidable with Acciari being there. And you look at Ian O'Reilly. I mean, they went head-to-head in the 2019 Stanley Cup final, 1-1, one loss. But regardless, that recent Stanley Cup experience and just how important it will be to this Maple Leaf club, it might be the edge needed in what will be paper-thin differences when it comes head-to-head with Tampa, as it was last year. And, in effect, where did the series go? Well, Tampa's bottom six outplayed Toronto's bottom six, and Nick Paul, 2 goals, Game 7. That's it, set match, and Tampa's on its way to the next round. So I really like the trade. Acciari, 14 minutes, +1, a goal. He's got 6 hits in his 2 games with the Maple Leafs. And O'Reilly, 1643. I know he was -2, the last one being into the empty net, but 10 of 15 on the draw. Dominant the night before against Montreal as well. I just think he and JT on that second line, whether one is in the middle or not, and John Tavares being one of the premier face-off players in the league, it's going to be important puck possession, especially in the D zone. And the Leafs now certainly have depth in spades in that regard. And good and Kyle. I think they're set to do well. And again, the next 7 weeks are going to be a dress rehearsal for what they've got to get done against Tampa. It's not going to be easy, but I just like the personnel in place, given who else they might add, whether it be a goaltender or a defenseman in the next week or so prior to the deadline on March 3rd.
I'm really excited to actually see the Leafs play against a borderline opponent in the playoffs, like a playoff type of opponent in the Buffalo Sabres, who's definitely right in the mix of it, and they've been kind of exciting to watch. And I'm really curious to see how this team with this new setup will do against the Buffalo Sabres. Before we go, I did tease it on Twitter that I was going to talk about this, but Henny, I want to know, in all your travels, did you ever have any close call with your passport?
Yeah, let me think. Chris Cuthbert is legendary for leaving passports in places.
Wow,
and
I did not know that.
Colleagues. Yeah, well, Chris, he's so hilarious. He's of the very best in the business, and his focus is on the game at hand. And he'll have left a passport. The only one I remember is leaving my passport in Toronto in the Nexus machine, and I got through up to a point. How did I have to? They had to let me back in. I forget what it was, but I had to come back through customs again and then get let back in. But my passport was in the machine, and somebody must have brought it up forward. But it's a very frightening situation in terms of, this is how you get around. This is how you get your business done. But I know we're going to get off this podcast, and there's going to be a couple of others. But do you have a story you can relate to us?
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Yeah. So today, I nearly got stuck in the United States. It was going to be very interesting. So myself and Mark Masters, TSN's Mark Masters, are on this trip, and we were both at the game the night before. So we both took not the same flight. We were on 2 different flights, and but we were arriving at the same time at different terminals. We were kind of coordinating. Let's just take the cab to the arena together because there's not going to be any time to check into the hotel. We have our carry-on and everything here. And so I get in a little bit before him, and I walk at O'Hare, you know, how all the terminals are connected past there. And I'd be kind of joking. I want to film Mark Masters get off the plane because that was the scene where he left his wife in the coach while he went first class and got a lot of attention for it.
That's a move, by the way.
Yeah. So and it's funny you mentioned Chris Cuthbert because he was the one who outed him on social media for it. So we're going to go do that. And I get off the plane and everything is fine. And so about 20 minutes had passed. And I walk all the way to Terminal 2. And so I finally meet up with him. And you know, when you're leaving an airport, there's a sign that says, once you reach this point, you can't go back. Like there's no, like you have to check back into security. I'm about to hit there. I pat myself down and my passport is not with me. And immediately I know where it was. And it is in the seat pocket of 7A where I was sitting on that plane.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm freaking out because a lot of time has passed and I have no idea what to do. Plus I have to get to the game. So I am sprinting because I'm also in another terminal because I've met Mark at his place. So that's why I mentioned that whole thing. So I have to sprint across from Terminal 2 to Terminal 3 in a suit jacket, in a winter jacket. I'm sweating tons of water by the time I get to the airport, and I look at the screen and it says the gate, the door's closed because the plane's about to back away. And I'm just like panting. I'm like, I left my passport in it. They're like, what? They're like, are you sure? Are you 100% sure? I'm like, yeah, it's in 7A. I know for a fact. I just left it there. Did the cleaning crew just like, the cleaning crew didn't see anything. The gate agent goes in through the door. The plane hasn't backed up yet, but clearly she comes back. She was clearly kind of disheveled because I guess she had to argue with the pilot to not back away yet. And she has my passport in her hand. And fantastic. I just like gave her a big hug because I was just like, I just couldn't believe. She's like, one more second and your passport would have been in Little Rock, Arkansas, because that's where that plane was going. And I don't know how I would have gotten home. So that's now my new close call.
But Dave, these are back-to-back games. You're tired. You're fatigued. A quick story. I had a passport stolen. Basically, I was on passport probation. I needed my passport to start the regular season. Yeah. And the woman who was taking care of me at Passport, Customs Canada just said, hey, did you coach a soccer game 2 nights ago in Mississauga? And I go, as a matter of fact, I did. Her daughter was playing on the other team. She goes back with my piece of paper. It gets stamped and they get my passport out to me like that. And it was just on recognition of coaching a soccer game. So you get it done. You get it done any way you can. You had help. Hugh had help today. I had help on that particular day. But you'll never do that again. That's a fact.
I couldn't believe it. I could not believe when I saw door close, I thought it was gone. And I've had some pretty lucky situations, like that trip to St. Louis. Only myself and Terry Cochan were able to make it because the original flight was canceled. That was going to direct to St. Louis the night before. And I missed my connection. I was stuck in D.C. and I was going to have to fly to Indianapolis and rent a car for 4 hours, which I did not want to do. And when I showed up, I saw the direct flight from D.C. to St. Louis was 10 minutes difference. And I went to the gate. I just pled my case, was very polite about it. And the longer it was taking, the more I felt something about that it was actually going to be successful. And she's like, you owe me a lunch and a dinner. And I'm like, don't worry, I will pay that forward. So good vibes all around. And that's right. Where I wanted to end this podcast. And so, Henny, thank you very much for staying up late with us tonight. I hope you've been enjoying the fine cuisine in Spain and staying up super late. And really glad that you were able to join it. And we'll get you for an off day pod where you'll be able to record at a decent hour. So again, thank you very much for that. And we'll get the next post-game show for you on Tuesday when the Toronto Maple Leafs take on the Sabres in Buffalo, which should be a very spirited battle. of the QEW. You've been listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's choice for free casino games, poker tips, and sports odds. Rink-Wide Toronto, pre-game, post-game, every game.
Hey, it's Darren Dreger and Ray Ferraro from the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. And Ray, we're into the second half of the NHL season, and the trade deadline is obviously getting closer.
Every night, wins and losses are starting to mean more as teams try to stay in the mix in the standings to secure that playoff spot. And man, some teams could use some help before the deadline.
Yeah, we've got the storylines, trade rumblings all covered, along with the top hockey guests twice weekly, right here on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. Check us out everywhere you get podcasts.